Hypothalamus is the part of diencephalon. As its name implies, it lies below the thalamus and separated from it through the hypothalamic sulcus. Most of the hypothalamus is hidden. The visible parts are located in interpedunculair fossa. On the medial side, it forms a wall of the third ventricle below the level of the hypothalamic sulcus. Here, you can see in this diagram, you can see the region of the hypothalamus. Here is the hypothalamic sulcus, which separates the hypothalamus from the thalamus. And here you can see anteriorly it is limited by the lamina terminalis. Inferiorly there lies the optic chiasma, the infundibulum, the mammillary body, and posteriorly you can see here is the posterior perforated system, and posteriorly you can see it merges with the subthalamus and with the tegmentum of the midbrain. Boundaries. It lies in contact with the internal capsule and ventral thalamus, that is the subthalamus. Posteriorly, it merges with the ventral thalamus and through it with the tegmentum of the midbrain. Anteriorly, it extends up to the lamina terminalis and merges with the certain olfactory structures in the region of the anterior perforated substance. Inferiorly, hypothalamus is related to structures in the floor of the third ventricle. They are tuber cilium, infundibulum, and the mammillary bodies. These structures are considered as part of the hypothalamus. Here in this diagram, you can see the various nuclei of the hypothalamus, and they has been grouped here. The red one, that is the, you can see the posterior hypothalamic nucleus, and this is the mammillary body. They are grouped in the mammillary group. Then there's this blue one, which includes the dorsomedial nucleus, the ventromedial nucleus, the arcuate nucleus. They are included in the tuberal group. The green one, the supraoptic group. Here you can see the paraventricular, the anterior hypothalamic, the supraoptic, and the suprachiasmatical nucleus. And here, the violet color here, this depicts the preoptic region, and here you can see the medial preoptic nucleus, and so there are mainly 9 nuclei subdivided into the three parts. Optic part, it includes the preoptic and supraoptic nuclei. The paraventricular nucleus lies just above the supraoptic and lateral nuclei in the lateral lobe. The suprachiasmatical nucleus lying above the optic chiasma. Tuberal part, it includes 4 nuclei, that is ventromedial nucleus, the dorsomedial nucleus, the tuberal nucleus lying in the lateral ventromedial nucleus, and arcuate nucleus lying in the floor of the third ventricle. Mammillary part, it includes 2 nuclei, mainly the posterior nucleus, which lies caudal to the ventromedial and dorsomedial nuclei, and mammillary nucleus. And the lateral nucleus, it lies lateral to the posterior nucleus. Important connections. The afferent connects. So this is very well connected with the various centers in the central nervous system. The afferents they include the hypothalamus receives visceral sensations through the spinal cord and brainstem reticular formation. It also connected to the several centers associated with the olfactory pathways, including the piriform cortex, cerebellum, and retina. The efferents they pass number one the supraoptico-hypophyseal tract from the optic nuclei to pars posterior, the pars tubularis, and pars intermedia of the hypophysis cerebri. Then the mammillothalamic tract. Number three, the mammillategmental tract, which consists of the periventricular system of fibers. And fourth is the tubuloinfundibular tract. This diagram summarizes the connections of the hypothalamus, which is true and fro, connected with the limbic system, the amygdala, connecting the hypothalamus um, through the stria terminalis and ventral amygothalamal pathways. It is to and fro connected with the septum pellucidum. Here you can see it is to and fro connected with the hippocampus, the anterior thalamic nucleus through the mammillary nucleus, that is the mammillothalamic tract. Then it is to and fro connected with the midbrain and the spinal cord. Yeah, so it is connected with the midbrain and with the spinal cord. Functions. The hypothalamus is a complex neuroglandular mechanism connected with the regulation of visceral and vasomotor activities of the body. Its functions can be summarized as follows. Number one, endocrine control. Hypothalamus controls the secretions of hormone from the pituitary gland by releasing hormones or release inhibiting hormones. The hypothalamus regulates secretions of the thyrotropin, that is the TSH, corticotropin, that is the ACTH, the somatotropin, that is the STH, the prolactin, the luteinizing hormone, that is the LH, the follicular stimulating hormone, that is the FSH, and melanocyte stimulating hormone by pars anterior of the hypophysis cerebri. Here you can very well see the con- connections of the anterior pituitary with the hypothalamic nuclei. And here you can see the posterior pituitary getting the neurosecretions from the hypothalamus. The neurosecretions, that is the oxytocin and vasopressin, that is the antidiuretic hormone or ADH, are secreted by the hypothalamus and they are then transported to the infundibulum and posterior lobe of the hypophysis cerebri. It also controls the general automatic it also controls the general autonomic effect, that is the anterior parts of the hypothalamus chiefly mediate parasympathetic activity and posterior parts chiefly mediate the sympathetic activity. The effects of often overlap. Thus, hypothalamus regulates cardiovascular, respiratory, and alimentary functions. Temperature regulation. The hypothalamus maintains the balance between heat production and heat loss of the body. Raised temperature is maintained by vasodilation, sweating, painting, and reducing the heat production. Lower body temperature is elevated by shivering and in prolonged cases by hyperactivity of thyroid. Regulation of food and water intake. The hunger or feeding center is placed laterally, the satiety center is placed medially. The stimulation of the feeding center or damage of the satiety center causes hyperphagia, that is overeating, leading to the obesity. Then stimulation of the satiety center or damage of the feeding center causes hyperphagia or even aphasia and death from starvation. The thrust or the drinking center is situated in the lateral part of the hypothalamus. Its stimulation causes copious drinking and overhydration. Sexual behavior and reproduction. Through its control of anterior pituitary, the hypothalamus controls gametogenesis, various reproductive cycles, that is the uterine and ovarian cycles, then maturation and maintenance of the secondary sexual characteristics. Through its connections with the limbic system, it participates in the elementary drives associated with the food, that is the hunger and thirst, and it also controls the sex behavior. Biological clock, that is the circadian rhythm. Certain tissues and organs systems of the body show a cyclic variation in their functional activity during the 24 hours of the day. For example, sleep and wakefulness. The wakefulness is maintained by reticular activating system. The sleep is produced by hypnogenic zones present mainly in the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and partly in by the brainstem. Then emotion, fear, rage, aversion, pleasure, and reward. These faculties are controlled by the hypothalamus, the limbic system, and the prefrontal cortex. Clinical anatomy. Lesions of the hypothalamus give rise to one of the following syndromes. Number one, obesity. Number two, diabetes insipidus. Number three, diencephalic autonomic epilepsy. It is characterized by flushing, sweating, salivation, lacrimation, tachycardia, retardation of respiratory rate, and unconsciousness. The sexual disturbances. It consists of either precocity or impotence. The disturbance of sleep. It presents as somnolence, that is the persistent sleep, or narcolepsy, that is paroxysmal sleep. Then hyperglycemia, that is increased blood sugar level, and glycosuria, that is passage of the sugar in the urine. Then acute ulcerations in the upper part of the gastrointestinal tract. So That is all about the hypothalamus, its connections, functions, and the clinical anatomy.